The jukebox sat in the corner of the bar humming through its fifth scratched record of the night, while dust floated in the amber lights, like tired ghosts clinging to the stale smell of beer and regret. No one noticed the door swing open at first. Not until the temperature dropped by something more than weather and the usual clatter of cues and laughter dulled to a hush. The biker stepped in slow with boots that echoed across the floor like they carried stories. No one wanted to hear his. Leather vest was torn at the edges and stitched with patches that didn't belong together. His beard thick and unkempt, and his eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses that showed no soul, just reflections of people who immediately looked away, walked like a man who knew he wasn't welcome but dared anyone to prove it. The regulars shifted in their seats. The bartender froze halfway through pouring a draft, and even the jukebox seemed to hiccup and rewind a few notes like it didn't want to play during whatever this was going to be. But she didn't look away. The woman in red heels playing solo at the pool table leaned on her cue stick and watched him approach like she had been expecting someone like him, or maybe just him. All along, her black leather jacket draped over a stool. Her blonde hair pulled back tight, except for the one curl she never bothered to tame, her eyes locked onto his. As he crossed the room, her cue moved silently across green felt as she aimed for the corner pocket but didn't shoot. Not yet. Her voice cut through the bar louder than it should have been and sharper than it had any right to be. "You're late." He stopped mid-step and tilted his head just a fraction, just enough to let the neon light catch the edge of his sunglasses. The crowd started whispering like wind, trying to guess what storm was coming. A man near the door muttered something about him being Jack, the same Jack who once split a man's nose with a pool ball, and never blinked, the same Jack who vanished after the alley fight with the 3 off-duty cops, and no charges ever filed. Jack didn't answer her. He took 2 more steps. The floor creaked under his boots like it wanted to give out. She didn't move. She smiled that slow, dangerous smile that said she'd already won something and just hadn't told anyone what the prize was. She said something else this time, quieter and colder. "Take it back or I'll show them the truth." That was when the whole place went still. Even the ceiling fan stopped spinning, and the man next to the jukebox took a deep breath and held it, because nobody talked to Jack like that. Not with that look in their eyes. Jack raised one hand and reached for her shirt sleeve, and then something no one expected happened. There was a crack in the air, like thunder without sound. Something invisible that split the room in half, and no one knew whether to run or stay frozen like statues, too afraid to blink. The bartender leaned forward but didn't say a word. His hand, still holding the half-poured beer foam, spilling over the rim and sliding down the glass. Slow and unnoticed, Jack stared at the woman for a moment longer than anyone thought he would, his fingers twitching as if pulling memories from deep scars. Hidden beneath his vest, the woman didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't lower her chin. Her eyes stayed locked on his, like she was waiting for something to rise from inside him, something dark and buried and covered in dust and smoke and sand. The silence stretched until it snapped, and Jack's voice came low and heavy like gravel soaked in gasoline. "You shouldn't have come here." The woman didn't answer. She just reached into her jacket on the stool and pulled out a crumpled photo, something old and stained with the corners curled and broken. She held it up for only him to see, and whatever was in that photo made his jaw clench and his hand drop back to his side. "You remember now, don't you?" she said. Jack didn't answer. He looked like a man watching ghosts crawl out from the cracks in the walls. She stepped forward, and for a second everyone thought he might swing or yell or turn and leave, but instead he just stood there like his boots were nailed to the floor. She kept walking until she was right in front of him, close enough for her breath to fog the lenses of his sunglasses. "Take it back," she said again, "or I'll show them the truth." Jack stared through her like he was seeing something else. Something from a desert, not a bar, something that smelled like gunpowder and smoke and sounded like screaming under a foreign sun. The regulars started to shift uncomfortably. No one knew what to do. The tension had teeth, and it was biting deeper with every second. Then, without warning, Jack moved. His hand shot forward and grabbed her arm, not rough but not gentle either. And in one fluid motion he pulled her close, and with his other hand ripped the left sleeve of her shirt clean off. The sound tore. Through the bar louder than the jukebox, louder than breath, louder than fear. What he revealed wasn't skin. It was ink, a tattoo just above her shoulder. Marine Corps emblem sharp and precise, weathered by time but unmistakable, and beneath it, a string of numbers and letters that looked like they belonged on a dog tag. The entire bar went silent again, but this silence felt different, heavier. The old man in the corner gasped, and his glass slipped from his hand and shattered across the floor. Because everyone recognized that symbol, but none of them could understand why she had it and what it meant until she spoke again. "You left me in Fallujah." The room had stopped breathing, and every pair of eyes hung on the ink on her shoulder like it was a live grenade. The Marine Corps' emblem was not just a tattoo, it was a brand, it was a story, it was a promise. And for someone like her to have it meant something had gone wrong long ago, something no one had ever spoken about out loud. Jack stepped back only slightly, but it was enough for everyone to notice, and in a bar where weakness was blood in the water, that one step meant everything. The old man near the door whispered a curse under his breath, and the bartender gripped the counter like it might float him away from the past. The regulars didn't know if they were watching a fight or a confession or the start of something none of them were brave enough to name, but they all stayed rooted in place, like they were part of something too late to avoid and too real to look away from. She rolled her shoulders slowly, letting the light hit the tattoo so no one could deny it was real. The lines were clean but old, as if they had been burned in during a time when ink was the only way to remember who you were and what you lost. Jack's mouth opened then closed again like he had something to say, but the words caught somewhere, behind the steel trap of guilt that lived in his chest. "You think running made it go away," she said, her voice not loud but sharp enough to cut glass. "You think the silence buried what you did, what you didn't do." Jack looked at the floor at her, the photo still clenched in her fist, and then back to the tattoo like he could unsee it if he stared hard enough. "You left me in Fallujah?" she repeated, and this time her voice cracked. Just barely, just enough for people to believe she was still human. Beneath the steel, the image of her in combat boots and dust and blood flickered in the air around her, and Jack looked like a man watching a slow-motion car crash, a memory he tried to drown. Crawl back up his throat. "I thought you were dead," he said, and the words didn't feel like they belonged to him, like someone else had shoved them out. She raised her chin higher and said, "No, you just hoped I was." A murmur passed through the crowd like a breeze that carried the scent of something burning. Something about the way she stood, the way her muscles tensed under that tattoo, told everyone this wasn't over. This wasn't even the middle. She turned slowly and pulled the rest of her shirt back from her shoulder, revealing more ink symbols, letters, numbers. And then they saw it, the name carved just below the emblem, Marcus J. Delgado, and Jack's face went white like he'd seen a ghost that never should have had a grave. The name hit Jack like a gut punch. He staggered back just half a step, but it was enough for the crowd to feel the shift like a tectonic plate grinding beneath old fault lines. Marcus J. Delgado, that name was not just a name, it was a history, a secret, a wound that had never healed. And now it was carved into her skin like a grave marker written in blood and regret. Jack's lips moved like he was trying to form a denial, but no sound came out, just a wheeze of breath and the sound of glass crunching under someone's foot. In the silence, the bartender stared down at the bar like he had just remembered something he had tried to forget for over a decade. The old man in the corner ran a trembling hand down his face, eyes wet, but refusing to blink. And somewhere in the back, a young guy who didn't understand the weight of the moment whispered, "Who the hell is Marcus?" And no one answered him because the silence was thicker than smoke. Jack looked at her like she was a ghost, like she had no Right to be standing in front of him alive and furious and tattooed with memories that should have been buried in the sand. She stepped toward him again slowly and with purpose, each step measured like the ticking of a bomb. Her voice was lower, now almost calm, but behind it was a storm. He trusted you. She said he followed you. He believed you. When you said we'd make it back, when you said we leave no one behind, you told us that. And then you ran, and you left him bleeding in that alley. Behind the compound, Jack's jaw clenched so hard the veins in his neck pulsed, and his fists balled at his sides, but he didn't strike, didn't yell, didn't deny I saw the fire in his eyes. She said I saw the blood, and I heard the shots, and I went back when they pulled me out 3 days later. I had to pry his tags from under the rubble with my own hands. The bar had gone so quiet they could hear the faint hum of a neon sign buzzing unevenly above the bottles on the shelf. I wore his. Tags under my armor every damn day, she said, and when they sent me home, I carved his name into my shoulder so no one would forget, and so I wouldn't either. Jack whispered I never knew. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Only ash, only pain. You didn't want to know, she said. You left and you drank and you lied and you built this tough guy mask so no one would see the coward underneath. Then she turned away from him and faced the rest of the bar, and she pointed straight at the old man who had gone pale as chalk and was gripping the edge of the table like it might keep him from collapsing. Ask him, she said. He was command. The old man didn't move at first, his fingers still gripping the edge of the table like they were welded there. His eyes locked on the woman like she had reached into a coffin and pulled out something he thought was buried forever the rest of. The bar stayed quiet, as if breathing too loud would cause everything to collapse. The woman's finger didn't waver, and her stare never blinked. He was command, she said again, louder this time, like a sentence handed down from a courtroom filled with ghosts. He knew what happened, and he let it get buried. He signed the papers. He erased the names. He closed the case and walked away, like none of it ever happened. The old man swallowed hard, his throat moving like he had something sharp stuck in it. And maybe he did. Maybe it was the truth that had been clawing at his insides for years trying to get out, but he had kept it buried beneath medals and memories and a bottle that never stayed full. I didn't know you were alive, he said, barely, a whisper, but it carried across the room like a shot fired in fog. She stepped closer, her boots clicking softly against the wood floor, and for a second she looked more like a soldier than anyone in the room, like something cut from steel and forged in fire. You buried my report, she said. You called it friendly fire. You called it an accident. You called it 100 different things, so you didn't have to call it what it was. He looked down at the table, then at Jack, then back at her and his. Hands trembled slightly as he pulled something from his coat. A folder old and worn with a bent corner, and a Marine Corps seal faded to almost nothing. This was never supposed to exist. He said it was supposed to disappear just like Delgado. Just like you. She took it from his hands without breaking eye contact, her fingers trembling now just slightly, and she opened the folder to reveal a report typed in all caps with names, dates, locations, and one photo that had been clipped to the top. It was Marcus lying face down in the rubble, blood soaked through his shirt, and his tags still hanging from his neck. She stared at it for a long moment, then looked up at Jack. This is what you ran from, she said, and you thought it would never catch. Up to you. Jack looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 10 minutes, and his hand reached up unconsciously toward his chest, where something beneath his shirt moved with the weight of memory. Because what no one in the bar knew was that Jack had the same tattoo, the same emblem, and underneath it, a matching name carved with a blade, but the woman wasn't done. She reached into her jacket again and pulled out something no one expected. Dog tags, 2 sets, and only one was Marcus. She held the dog tags up high enough for everyone to see, and the light caught on the metal like it knew it was part of something sacred, something heavy, something final. The room stayed frozen, every face caught between disbelief and dread. And no one dared to speak, not even Jack, who now looked at the tags like they were proof of a nightmare he had never stopped having. The woman's hand trembled slightly, but her voice did not. Her voice was steel. "One of these belongs to Marcus," she said, "and the other." She paused, letting the silence lean forward. "The other belongs to someone who should have died right there with him." She stepped forward and dropped them both on the table in front of the old man, who flinched as if they burned on. Contact. The metal clinked against the wood, and the sound cut through the air like a gunshot. These were recovered 3 days after the mission. She said 3 days after command pulled back and left us behind 3 days after someone hit the panic button and disappeared into the dust. Her eyes cut to Jack, who stood now like a man on trial, his hands at his sides, his breathing uneven. The tough guy mask shattered into 1,000 pieces, and beneath it, nothing but raw guilt. I buried him myself. She said I found him with his back against the wall and 2 rounds in his chest and this tag in his hand. She pointed to the second one, the one no one recognized. It didn't belong to Marcus. It belonged to you. The bar was absolutely still like. Time had stopped, and the only thing moving was the weight of the truth falling from the rafters. Jack looked down slowly, eyes locked on the tag that bore his name and his blood type, and the date he joined the Corps, and for a moment everyone thought he might fall right there onto the floor. The old man behind the table spoke, then voice rough with age and shame. "We were told to write it off," he said. "The order came down to scrub it clean. Too much heat. Too many questions. Jack wasn't supposed to be there. Delgado wasn't even supposed to be in that sector. It was all off book." Jack turned slowly to face him, voice low. "You said you'd get us out. You said we had backup. You left us." The old man nodded, eyes wet. "I did. And so did you." The woman snapped. "He didn't have a choice. She said you ran, Jack, and now we all live in the shadow of what you did." Jack's hands clenched, and he reached slowly into his shirt, pulling out the chain around his neck, revealing what everyone now feared. Another. Dog tag a third one. The same name, Marcus J. Delgado, but this one was covered in dried blood, and no one ever found out where it came from or why it was never reported. The bar was silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from quiet music or a lull in conversation, but the kind that feels like a deep breath before something irreversible. The third tag hung from Jack's hand, swaying gently like a pendulum counting, down to something no one could name, the name Marcus J. Delgado glinted faintly beneath dried blood, as if the metal still remembered the last breath of the man who wore it. Jack stared at it like he was trying to erase time by force, like if he focused hard enough he could go back and change the moment everything went wrong. The woman's face softened just slightly, but her voice stayed firm, cold-edged with fire and history. "You kept it all this time," she said, like it meant something, like it made up for what you did. Jack didn't answer, not with words, but with the kind of look only those who've seen death can understand. His hand closed around the tag like he was trying to keep it from disappearing again, and when he looked up, his eyes were no longer hard, they were hollow. "He died saving me," he said, his voice low and rough. "I was hit. I was bleeding. I couldn't walk. He pulled me behind cover. He gave me his water, and then he went back for the others, and I never saw him again. Heard the gunfire, and I knew he was gone, but I ran because I didn't know what else to do." "You left his body?" she said, her voice shaking with the rage of 10 years and the sorrow of 10 lifetimes. "I left a piece of myself there with him," he whispered, "and maybe it should have been me. Maybe it was supposed to be." The old man at the table couldn't look at either of them anymore. His shoulders sagged under the weight of everything he had covered up, everything he had ordered, and everything he had tried to forget. "I thought hiding it would protect you," he said. "Protect all of us. You protected no one," she snapped. "Not him, not me, not the truth. You just buried it like we wouldn't come digging." She turned and looked at the people around the bar. And for the first time, they didn't see just a woman or a soldier or a tattooed stranger. They saw something ancient and raw. Someone who had carried her pain not in silence, but in ink, in scars, in the way she walked and breathed and burned. He was more than a name. She said he was our brother. She looked back at Jack and stepped closer until they were only inches apart. "You wear that ink like it means something, but you never earned it." Jack said nothing, and then slowly he reached up and pulled the dog tags from around his neck. Both of them, the one with his name and the one with Marcus, and he placed them on the table beside hers. "You're right." He said, "I didn't earn it." Then he did something no one expected. He pulled his vest off, his shirt off, baring his chest to the entire room, and there it was, the tattoo matching hers, but not quite. The eagle globe and anchor was there, but the lines were jagged, rough, almost carved in desperation, and below it, the name Marcus. J. Delgado, not inked professionally, but slashed with something sharp, raw, angry, unfinished. The bartender stepped forward and whispered, "That's not done by a needle." Jack nodded. "I did it myself," he said in a tent with a broken piece of glass. 2 days after I got out, I couldn't forget him, so I carved him into me. I carved the guilt into my skin. The woman stared at the wound like it was a mirror, like it was a confession she had waited years to hear but still didn't know what to do with. "He died! A hero!" Jack said, voice cracking. "I lived like a ghost." And just like that, the fight drained out of her. The rage faded, and what remained was sorrow and silence, and a question no one would ask. She turned toward the door tag still clutched in her hand, and the crowd parted as she walked through. But as she stepped outside into the night, the moonlight hit her back, and the bar caught a glimpse of something no one had noticed before. Another tattoo just beneath the one they'd all seen. Something faded and written in jagged lines across her shoulder blade. It was the same emblem, the same name, but carved backwards like it had been done while looking in a mirror, and no one ever found out who put it there, or why it matched the one Jack carved into himself with a piece of glass and a memory that never let go.